from a conductor's perspective, it's so wonderful adding something like this to the repertoire, because I don't think there's a lot of works like that for us. In the wind band world, we're constantly looking to kind of reinvent what the ensemble is with flexible instrumentation, collaborations with other artists, and anything that we can kind of bring to the table that's artistic and connects with audiences. To me, it just breathes a different life into what the ensemble is and what the ensemble can be.
Part of it was the conversation that really touched on ideas and emotions, and not so much on, I want the French horn to do this. It was really about what the feeling is.
Well, I think it's interesting because so many people, when you look at the wind band medium, oftentimes we think about educational music, where it's like, well, the purpose of this is the players. What your upper level wind ensembles are really trying to do is it becomes less about the players and more about the audience and the expression and what you have to say. What I wanted to get to the root of was what are we trying to make people feel here, and what do we need to use in terms of color, in terms of orchestration to help them connect with, because it's such a beautiful message just innately through the work.
It was so thrilling that first day after we had met and you had worked on the first movement, and we talked about people who have been inspiration to me, like Bjork, like Tori Amos, like Nine Inch Nails, right? And then I come back and you had presented me also with a MIDI of this awesome, sensual, like deep groove that I didn't even know was possible to do with.
Well, and it's so interesting because when you look at the original sketches, like you look at it, you're like, oh, this is beautiful chamber music, and very intimate. But when we started talking about your inspirations, to me it was like, well, of course it has to groove. It has to have these moments where it feels like rock music, it feels like EDM, it feels like hip hop. You tie all these popular influences into it. But then there's also the moments, especially when you get to the third movement, that become, again, very intimate, and it may be just vocalist and three players, and that's it.
When something expands and sounds so absolutely larger than life, and then you bring it down because of the lyrics to a place that is so sacred, then the intimacy actually is even more magnetic for the audience.
The thing that I find most often when we look at scores and we look at what we're going to program, things like that, is that you find so many things are just over orchestrated, and when we went through this process and we started talking about the intimacy of the work itself, like for me, I started with just a completely blank canvas. And the goal was, we're only going to add a color if we need it. Now, in the long term, did it end up being a pretty close to a standard like wind ensemble instrumentation? Absolutely. But there were moments where it's like, okay, well, we only need a string bass and an English horn, then let's just use that. And so for me, it was like challenging yourself to, okay, we've developed and we've said this. Now, how do we pare it back down and make it intimate again?
I remember the back and forth. It was so beautiful because this is where your magic came into it, where the chorale in the beginning of the third movement, I wrote it with the intention of the singing starting immediately with it. Do you remember?
I do, and we added that introductory phrase.
Yeah, and you came back to me and said, hey, listen, it's such a beautiful phrase. Can we just take it instrumentally and do a brass chorale with it before the singer comes in? And something about that moment, it just opens up the heavens and it creates all this radiance.
To me, that was a moment that it felt like it just needed pause, because it's so intense rhythmically in that second movement and color-wise with the orchestrations fading. There's a lot of text painting with the color, with the metallics, with the wooden colors trading back and forth. So then you get to this long, basically like wind down of the groove into just this piccolo solo. And to me, it just felt like it just needed a time to just sit and just let people just kind of catch their breath a little bit.